Now what happens, and I want to make this clear because this is where many people get confused. Some people will take this ibara, will take this text, and then they'll say to you that why do you do ta'wil? Now number one, every common person on the street, the common Muslim today, doesn't go around doing ta'wil, right? Ta'wil means interpreting. So let me take a step back and explain this issue to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He's used a number of words. He said that the hand of Allah, right? For example, He says that Allah's hand is above theirs. In the hadith it says that Allah's hand is with a group. Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah. In another place it says that wherever you turn, you will see, you will face the countenance of Allah. You'll find the countenance of Allah, the wajh of Allah. So you got a number of these things. Now what happened is that you had some literalists, right? Some mujassima, right? Anthropomorphists you call them. What they did was they took this and they said, well look, you know, Allah is got a form like a human form, right? Because He says it. I mean, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. They missed the main ayah. The main ayah is laysa kamithlihi shay, which governs all of this, which is that there is nothing like unto Allah. So if Allah is saying something in the Quran which gives you an impression in our mind, because shaitan's always there to try to misguide us, that gives you an impression that there's something else like Allah, that Allah has a hand like the hand of the people, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, then you must remember that that's not the case, because you must have absolute tanzih and transcendence. You must think Allah above all of these things. So you've got these terms. So you had this extreme group who said that. You had another group, right, who initially they were complete mujassima. But after Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, and I'm going to give him that because he was a great imam when it came to fiqh and things. When it comes to Aqida, many people had many problems with him, and people went as far as doing takfir. I mean, we're not going to go that far, right? But in terms of fiqh, he was a master. In terms of Aqida, there were a number of things that many of the great ulama said that he stumbled on. And one of these is what gives rise to many problems today. Many of the polemics today are based on that. Now, after his time, you had less overt mujassima. It was like taken underground. A study will show that afterwards it became more hashawiyya, or crypto-anthropomorphists, hidden anthropomorphists. And that is basically people who will insist. Now listen to this very carefully. Let me explain the method of the Salaf, the true first generations. The Sahaba and the Tabi'een after them, the great Imams, the way they dealt with words like this, terms like this that were mentioned in the Quran, they would say, we leave it to Allah. We believe in it the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has intended it, but we leave it to Allah. We're not going to go in there and make ta'wil and interpret it and all the rest of it, right? We're not going to do that. Now, today you have people who say that the method of the Salaf was not that, but it's a different method. They said that the method today, that was the method of the Salaf according to them, they're projecting this onto the Salaf, onto the true Salaf, is that you must think, you must believe that that this word yadun or wajhun is literal. It's haqiqah. That Allah has a hand. We're just not going to describe it. Some of them went as far as saying, and Ibn al-Jawzi, Abu al-Faraj Ibn al-Jawzi, the great Hanbali scholar who alhamdulillah was not on the Hashawiyya path, he said, my skin, my hair stands on end when I hear some of my fellow Hanbalis saying that you can say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a face, He has a hand, He runs, because all of these things are mentioned in the Quran or Sunnah, but you can't say He's got a head. I mean, can you imagine telling that to a crowd? What you're literally doing is that you're making them visualize a form. You can say He's got a face, you can say He's got this, that, but you can't say He's got a head. What kind of a creature are you trying to create? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Why do you even need to get to this level? I mean, the Salaf never spoke about it at that level, right? I mean, some went, I mean, some of these deviants went even further, right? But I'm just going to focus on what the focus is today. The way of the Salaf is that you just leave them the way they are. You consign their knowledge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What these people say is that no, if you just consign the matter to Allah and you say we don't know what it means that the Quran has terms that are useless, that are redundant, superfluous, that there's no meaning to them. In order for the Quran to have meaning, you must establish a literal meaning. So when it says hand, He's got a hand. When He's got a face, He's got a face. But We're going to say, it's not like the face of the human beings. It's not like the hand. Why do you even go that far? Now the later scholars of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the Ash'aris and the Maturidis, I'll go into that a bit very, very soon. But what they said, what happened is that because of the fitna created by these mujassima, those who gave Allah a form, people began to question. You see, once you create a suspicion in the minds of people, curiosity in the minds of people, then shaitan takes over, right? So they had to give something to the people to hold on to. So they thought very hard. So the Khalaf, the later scholars, they agreed among themselves that out of the many interpretations, because people are asking for an interpretation, and they won't just sit back and say, okay, leave it to Allah, right? Because there was just so much development in people's thoughts, and they became a lot more philosophical, and they were not so simple anymore. Imam Ghazali mentions that the people who will go fastest into paradise will be the bala, the simple people who don't, who don't question much of these things. I've had people who come and they want to convert to Islam. You sit them down and you ask them, like, ask your questions. Some people, they've got numerous questions. There was one brother, he came to every single one of our bayans in the masjid, every single program. He was more regular to the programs in the masjid than any of the other Muslims in the area. And it was only after 7 months that he knocked on my door after Asr one day and he goes, I'm ready now. Right? But then there's other people I've had, I'm like asking, do you have any questions? Because it's not a good idea to just throw everybody into Islam and they don't know what they're doing, and then they go back out, because that's worse. Right? You don't want that. You want them to have an educated entry into Islam. But there's some very simple people who don't care about this kind of sophisticated ideologies and so on. They've got, their hearts are clean, their hearts are clear, they're pure, they're sound, qalbun salim. They just enter into the faith. Right? So that's what Imam Ghazali mentions. But what you had Islam spread through Persia. Right? You had a lot of philosophy, Greek philosophy, peripatetic philosophers coming in, Neoplatonic ideologies and so on and so forth coming in. People had questions. So the ulama said, we can't just tell them to leave it now. So what they decided, some of these great scholars of the Ash'aris and the Maturidis, what they decided is that we will try to give an interpretation. And some of this they actually related from Ibn Abbas radiyallahu an. يَوْمَ يُكْشَفُ عَنْ سَاقٍ وَيُدْعَوْنَ إِلَى السُّجُودِ فَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ Surah Noon, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Surah Al-Qalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in the Quran. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu does interpretation there. He explains what, he gives an interpretations for the word saq, which literally means shin. Right? So they weren't completely doing something new. They weren't innovating something completely new. They made it very clear that to follow the method of the Salaf, which was that just leave it to Allah, that is the safest course. That is the safest course. But in light of today's fitna, in the curiosity that people have, and in the deviancy, in the direction of deviancy they're going, we are allowing some amount of ta'wil that's appropriate, rather than some kind of strange redundant ta'wil that makes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a creature that, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, that anybody could kind of fabricate in their minds. So they allowed it, but all the time they stressed. Now this is, I'd like to clarify that most of the Hanafis are normally from the Maturidi school. Okay? Right? I don't want you to go out there and make a big fitna about this. Alright? If you've never heard about it before, I don't want you to make a big fitna. What are you, brother? Maturidi, Ash'ari? I don't want you to do that. Because it doesn't matter. As long as you've got the correct Aqida, that's what's important. Alright? So I don't want to make this another point. But I know that there's going to be people who will confuse you. All the Ash'aris are deviant. In fact, when you got these, type on the internet, mashallah, it's proliferated with these dictionaries and encyclopedias of the deviant groups. And one of them is always the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. And the Hanafis and the Shafis and the Malikis and the Hanbalis. Right? And it's just like these are dal, mudil, and these are this, that and the other.